At a Boston healthcare conference, Dr. Ayanna Brooks challenges a room full of billionaires, then catches the attention of Elias North, a biotech CEO with a secret past. What begins as a clash sparks a revolution and an unexpected love. Before we get into the story, comment below where in the world you are watching from today. Men and women in expensive suits networked over champagne and fancy appetizers at the National Healthcare Innovation Conference. "There you are," called out Dr. Wilson, her department head. "Come meet some of the sponsors." Dr. Ayanna Brooks stood quietly by the window, watching the scene unfold with careful eyes. At 30, she was younger than most of the attendees, and as one of the few black women present, she stood out whether she wanted to or not. The grand ballroom of the Boston Waterfront Hotel buzzed with activity. "Dr. Brooks," Ayanna smoothed down her simple navy dress and followed him into the crowd. "I've read your work on community health centers," said a silver-haired man from a pharmaceutical company. "Very unambitious. Thank you." The topic was innovative solutions for underserved communities, and the stage was filled with CEOs, tech entrepreneurs, and venture capitalists, most of whom had never set foot in the communities they claimed to serve. Though I prefer to call it necessary. "I'm here to listen more than speak." Ayanna smiled politely. She raised her hand, and to her surprise, the moderator called on her. "I have a concern about the direction of this conversation." Unlike the others, he wore no tie, just a crisp white shirt and charcoal suit. At 31, he was already a legend, a billionaire who had revolutionized cancer treatments. "Our new app allows patients to video chat with doctors from anywhere." The next morning, Ayanna checked her notes before the main panel discussion. They need clinics that don't close at 5 when they get off work at 6. They need doctors who look like them and understand their lives. Dr. Wilson would probably scold her later for not being strategic enough with potential donors. "Our next speaker is Jeffrey Pendleton from MedTech Solutions," announced the moderator. A man with perfectly coiffed hair took the microphone. "The solution is simple," he said. "More technology." Ayanna shook her head slightly. His voice was deeper in person, with a slight accent she couldn't place. She thought about her father's congregation back in Detroit, elderly people who could barely text, let alone navigate a healthcare app. And that brings us to our final speaker, Elias North of North Biotech. Another time, perhaps. He handed her his card, not a business card, but a small cream-colored card with just his name and a phone number. "If you change your mind." The room seemed to shift as a tall man with intense dark eyes approached the podium. "Thank you," Elias said simply. He eats companies for breakfast and never speaks at these things unless he's announcing some billion-dollar initiative. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Billionaires didn't usually come to listen. "I'd like to hear more about your work in Detroit." The moderator opened the floor for questions. Hands shot up around the room, but something inside Ayanna wouldn't let her stay silent any longer. She was surprised to see Elias slip into the back row just as she began. At her round table on health equity, there he was again. Not dominating the conversation like most powerful men would, just listening. He took no notes, asked no questions, but his eyes never left her as she spoke. Ayanna stood, her heart pounding but her voice steady. "Dr. Ayanna Brooks, Detroit Public Health Initiative." The room went quiet. "I'm here to learn things that will actually help my patients. If we keep designing systems for the people funding them, instead of the people suffering under them, nothing will ever change." She could feel the tension rise. The moderator shifted uncomfortably. "My patients don't need fancy apps, they need bus fare to get to appointments." They found a corner table, and Elias ordered for them, just regular coffee, nothing fancy. From the corner of her eye, she noticed Elias North leaning forward in his chair, watching her intently. "Direct. I like that." He took a sip of his coffee. "Do you know much about me, Dr. Brooks?" "Thank you for your passionate input, Dr. Brooks," the moderator said, already looking for another question. After the panel, Ayanna gathered her things quickly. She had said too much, been too honest. "Fair. But do you know where I came from? I grew up in a neighborhood not so different from the ones you serve. My mother cleaned hotel rooms like this one. I know your cancer therapies cost more than most of my patients make in a year." Dr. Brooks. She turned to find Elias North standing there, his security detail hovering at a respectful distance. The systems are broken because they serve the wrong masters. He glanced at his watch. It's late. He looked directly at Ayanna. The irony isn't lost on me that I now own pieces of the same healthcare system that failed her. The hotel restaurant is probably crowded. His voice remained steady, but his eyes darkened with memory. Real good, not just charity galas and photo ops. I watched her wait for hours in emergency rooms, only to be given aspirin and sent home. But the system resists change, even from the inside. Would you join me for coffee in the lounge instead? Just to talk about her father's church and her mother's nursing career, about his research and the compromises he'd had to make to bring life-saving drugs to market. There were the expected articles about his wealth and business acumen, but also older pieces about his mother's death and his unusual path to success. Unlike yesterday, today he spoke. And when he did, he echoed some of her own points about community-based care and affordability. He asked, genuinely seeming to care about her answer. He had worked as a hospital janitor to pay for community college before earning a scholarship to MIT. "Mr. North," she said coolly, "your question. It was the only honest thing said all day." "Well, honesty doesn't seem to be what these conferences are about." A slight smile touched his lips. "Would you join me for coffee?" Ayanna studied him. Men like Elias North didn't ask for coffee without wanting something. His eyes held a sadness that couldn't be faked. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. North, but I have another session to attend." He nodded, not pushing. "My father preached it, and my mother lived it." Later that evening, Ayanna's colleague Maria caught up with her at the hotel bar. "They died in a car accident 5 years ago. Girl, did I just see Elias North talking to you?" "The Elias North?" Ayanna shrugged. He was just being polite. "How he developed his first medical patent at 23, she asked. No wife, no family for the great Elias North? How he still felt like an outsider among his wealthy peers. Hard to find someone who sees past the bank account. Polite? Do you know what they call him? The Wolf. You're brilliant. You could be making 10 times your salary in private practice. People either want something from me, or they're intimidated. No in between." The city lights reflected in the harbor, and a cool breeze carried the scent of salt water. "You're the first person in a long time who just sees me, because you see the world as it should be, not just as it is." "Well, today he wanted to buy me coffee." Maria's eyes widened. "And you said, 'No, of course, I'm not here to network with billionaires.'" By night they talked about healthcare, politics, books, music. Elias was nothing like the cold, calculating businessman the media portrayed. He was thoughtful, curious, and surprisingly funny. The next day, Ayanna led a small breakout session on community health workers. Elias North represented something entirely different. Unpredictable, complicated, intense. The pattern continued throughout the day. No kiss, no touch, just a promise to stay in touch. Men like Elias didn't belong in her world, and she certainly didn't belong in his. Yet something about him felt right, he hesitated. By the third time, Ayanna was annoyed. After her session ended, she approached him directly. "Are you following me, Mr. North?" He didn't flinch at her directness. "I'm attending sessions that interest me." "And what exactly interests you about community health models for low-income neighborhoods? Planning to buy one?" Instead of taking offense, he smiled. A real smile that reached his eyes. "I deserve that. But no, I'm interested because you're right." That caught her off guard. "Right about what?" "About all of it." Rain streaked the windows of the hotel, and something about the dreary evening made Ayanna reconsider. "Fine, one coffee." The lounge was quiet, with soft jazz playing in the background. "So," Ayanna said, "why is a billionaire biotech CEO stalking my presentations on community health?" Elias smiled again. "I know North Biotech is worth about 20 billion. He nodded, taking the hit. Ayanna didn't. The lukewarm coffee sat between them like a barrier. "I wasn't born rich, Dr. Brooks." Ayanna listened skeptically. Every rich person seemed to have a rags to riches story when it suited them. She got sick when I was 16, cancer. We had no insurance, no money for treatments. I'm sorry about your mother, Ayana said, her voice softening slightly. By the time someone took her seriously, it was too late. The rain fell harder outside, drumming against the windows. That's why your words weren't just brave, Dr. Brooks. They were true, and truth is rare in rooms like the one yesterday. For the first time, Ayana really looked at him, not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, but as a person. Call me Ayana, she said finally. Elias, he replied with a nod. They talked for hours, about Detroit, where she grew up. You could do so much good with your resources, she said. I'm trying, he said. As the lounge began to close, Elias walked her to the elevator. I'm speaking on the final panel tomorrow, he said. I'd value your opinion. Ayana surprised herself by saying, I'll be there. Back in her room, she Googled him. The next morning, Ayana found herself watching Elias on stage with new eyes. After the panel, he found her again. What did you think? I think you're more than I expected, she admitted. His phone buzzed. I have to take this. Dinner tonight. Ayana hesitated. Something was happening between them, something unexpected. Just dinner, he said, reading her hesitation, to continue our conversation. Okay, she found herself saying, just dinner. That evening, his driver took them to a small Ethiopian restaurant far from the conference hotel. No press, no handlers, no show. My mother was Ethiopian, he explained, as they shared injera bread and spicy stews. This food reminds me of her. Over dinner, Ayana learned more about the man behind the headlines. Enough about me, he said. Tell me more about you. Why public health? My parents taught me that service is love in action, she said. And what do they think of your career now? Ayana looked down. Elias reached across the table and briefly touched her hand. I'm sorry. His touch was warm, unexpected. Ayana pulled her hand back gently. What about you? He laughed, but there was a hollowness to it. Poor little rich boy, she teased, but without malice. It sounds ridiculous, I know, but wealth creates walls I never meant to build. And which am I? Ayana asked boldly. Neither, he said without hesitation. The rest of the week passed in a blur. By day, they attended conference sessions. On the last night of the conference, they walked along the Boston waterfront. I've enjoyed getting to know you, Ayana, Elias said. Me too, she admitted, though I'm still not entirely sure why a billionaire CEO is spending his evenings with a public health doctor from Detroit. He stopped walking and turned to face her. Because you challenge me. The intensity in his eyes made her heart race. I go back to Detroit tomorrow, she said, breaking the tension. I know. Ayana thought about the comfort of her life in Detroit, her small apartment, her predictable routine, her important but unglamorous work. I'd like that, she said finally. As they turned to head back to the hotel, Elias's security detail appeared, keeping a discreet distance. Your shadows never leave you alone, do they? Ayana observed. One of those walls I mentioned, he said with a rueful smile. Fame has a price. Back at the hotel, they said goodnight in the lobby. In her room, Ayana packed her suitcase, her mind racing. What was she doing? True. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. Thank you for seeing me, not just my name. Safe travels tomorrow. E. Detroit was now his only destination, and Ayana Brooks was the reason why. Ayana smiled and placed her phone on the nightstand. Whatever was happening between them, it would have to wait until Detroit. What would I do without you, Shanice? For now, she had a plane to catch and a reality to return to, one very different from the world of Elias North. What she didn't know was that Elias had already changed his plans, cancelling meetings in London and Tokyo. After 2 weeks back from Boston, she had settled into her routine again. Patient consultations, community outreach, and endless paperwork. The conference felt like a distant dream, especially her encounters with Elias North. What she didn't mention was the text message she'd received that morning. Detroit tomorrow. Dinner? E. Dr. Shi arrived at Riverside, a local restaurant overlooking the Detroit River, 15 minutes early. He looked different here, more relaxed, less the billionaire CEO and more the man who had shared Ethiopian food with her in Boston. Brooks. His smile was warm. The kind of place that builds community, not just serves food, Ayana explained. The owner gives free meals to families who can't afford to eat out on birthdays and anniversaries. This place is beautiful. 7 p.m. Tomorrow, I'll text you the address. Planning to buy a piece of it? The words slipped out before she could stop them. There's that honesty again. No, Ayana, I'm here because I want to understand your world, the same way you've made an effort to understand mine. Tell me about your work here. Show me the real Detroit. Elias told her about his hectic schedule since the conference. Board meetings, research updates, endless decisions about his company's direction. Men like him didn't fit into her world. Ayana Brooks stepped out of the clinic into the fading Detroit sunlight. Called Shanice, the clinic receptionist, running after her. You forgot to sign these referrals. There was no pretense there, no agenda she could detect. Ayana smiled and took the clipboard. They don't see the communities, the resilience, the pride. I do care about your money, what it could do for communities like this one, the power you have to change things. They're in my world, which isn't real. You're authentic, Ayana. You challenge me. It's about a crisis at one of our labs. You don't care about my money or my name. Probably work even more hours than you already do, Shanice replied with a knowing look. Any exciting plans for the weekend? Even in jeans and a casual shirt, he carried himself with authority. She could see him transform as he spoke, his posture straightening, his voice becoming more commanding. This was the CEO, the billionaire, the man the world knew as the Wolf. His touch sent warmth through her. Come with me. I want to show you my world the way you've shown me yours. Just catching up on sleep and laundry, Ayana said, signing the forms. She put on John Coltrane, her father's favorite, and kicked off her shoes. I'm sorry, I have to fly back tonight. She told herself to forget him, to move on. Their worlds were too different, the gap between them too wide. There's an issue with our latest drug trial. Each card contained a single line, thinking of you from my universe. E. She hadn't replied yet. Part of her wanted to see Elias again, but another part warned her to keep her distance. Elias cancelled his return flight and spent the weekend with Ayana. She showed him her clinic, introduced him to community leaders, and took him to her father's old church, where the congregation still remembered her as Preacher Brooks' little girl. Her small apartment welcomed her with familiar comfort, books stacked on coffee tables, family photos on the walls, and her father's old record player in the corner. As the music filled the room, Ayana finally replied to Elias's text, I know a good place, and they specifically requested that you lead the project. His response came immediately, looking forward to it. The next evening, Ayana chose her outfit carefully, a simple burgundy dress that was nice enough for dinner, but not so fancy that it looked like she was trying too hard. Your program has better outcomes than anything I've seen. The data supports it. At exactly 7, Elias walked in. No security detail, no fancy clothes, just jeans, a button-down shirt, and a leather jacket. So you came alone, she said as he sat down across from her. Your model works, and it deserves to be funded properly. I wanted to see you, not bring an entourage. It's one of the few restaurants left from my childhood. Elias looked around with appreciation. Exactly. She was surprised he understood so quickly. Elias called every evening, no matter where in the world he was. Other times, she sent him reports from her clinic with questions about scaling their programs. They talked about everything: her patients, his business decisions, books they were reading, memories of their parents. They evaluated your program on its merits. I only suggested they look at it. Over dinner, they fell back into the easy conversation they'd shared in Boston. But enough about that, he said. Thank you, she said finally. But next time, talk to me first. She used some of her savings to buy a simple but elegant black dress and booked a flight to New York, commercial, despite Elias's offer to send his jet. Why? Ayana felt out of place immediately. Instead of taking offense, Elias laughed. You look beautiful, he said, kissing her cheek. After dinner, they walked along the riverfront. The Renaissance Center lit up the skyline, and across the water the lights of Windsor, Canada twinkled. "This isn't what most people think of when they think of Detroit," Elias observed. "Most people only know what they see on the news," Ayanna said. As Elias led her through the crowd, Ayanna felt eyes on them, heard the whispers. "Show me," he said simply. And so, over the next 2 days, she did. "You told me your mother died of cancer when you were 16. Situations. You made up a whole story about growing up poor, about watching your mother die because she couldn't afford healthcare." On Sunday afternoon, they sat on a bench in Belle Isle Park, watching families picnic and children play. "Thank you for this," Elias said quietly. "For what?" "Victoria is my stepmother. My father married her when I was 18, after he made his first million in real estate. For showing me your Detroit, for trusting me enough to let me in." Ayanna studied his face. "She did die of cancer. We were poor. I did work as a janitor to pay for community college. Why me, Elias, really? There must be hundreds of women in your world who would be easier to, whatever this is." He stepped closer. "I've never told anyone about my real mother, not until you." He turned to face her. "That's exactly why." A stunning blonde woman in a red dress stood there. "Elias, darling, they're about to announce the donations. Oh, I didn't realize you had company." "That's not entirely true," she admitted. "What else haven't you told me, Elias?" Instead of withdrawing, Elias leaned closer. "Then help me use it better." Before she could respond, his phone rang. He glanced at it and frowned. "I have to take this." While he stepped away to take the call, Ayanna watched him. She closed the door behind her. "No, I didn't tell you everything about my family history. This world of his, with its secrets and social games, was foreign to her. But everything that matters, everything about who I am and how I feel about you, that's all true." When he returned, his expression was troubled. Disappointment flooded through her, stronger than she expected. "I understand. I don't want to leave," he said, taking her hand for the first time. Ayanna asked, though she already had a good idea. "What?" "To New York, just for a few days." Ayanna pulled her hand away gently. "Elias, I have patience, responsibilities. Just think about it," he said. "I can send the jet back for you later this week." "The jet," she repeated, reality crashing back. "See, that's exactly it. We live in different universes." His eyes searched hers. Universes can collide. After Elias left, Ayanna threw herself back into work. Then the flowers started arriving at the clinic. Not expensive bouquets, but simple arrangements of her favorite wildflowers. How had he known? Shanice raised an eyebrow after the third delivery. "Someone's persistent. Someone's wasting their time," Ayanna replied, but she couldn't help smiling. A week after Elias left, Dr. Wilson called her into his office. "Ayanna, do you know anything about this?" He pushed a letter across his desk. She picked it up and gasped. It was a grant notification from the North Foundation, $5 million for their clinic's community health worker program. "I didn't apply for this," she said truthfully. "Well, someone did," Dr. Wilson said. That evening, Ayanna called the number on Elias's card for the first time. "What did you do?" she demanded when he answered. "Hello to you too," he said, amusement in his voice. "The grant, Elias. $5 million? I never asked for your charity." "It's not charity," he said, his tone turning serious. "It's investment in something that works." "You researched my program?" "Of course I did. I'm still a businessman, Ayanna. I don't throw money away." She sat down, conflicted. "I don't want special treatment because of whatever this is between us." "This had nothing to do with us," he assured her. "My foundation has a separate board." Ayanna wasn't entirely convinced, but she couldn't deny the good the money would do. "Does this mean there will be a next time?" he asked hopefully. Despite herself, Ayanna smiled. "We'll see." Over the next month, they fell into a strange, long-distance relationship. Sometimes he sent her articles about healthcare innovations with notes like, "What do you think? Too tech-focused?" Then came the invitation, a gala in New York for the North Foundation's annual fundraiser. Come as my guest, Elias said over the phone. See what we're trying to do. A gala? I don't exactly have gala clothes, Elias. Just come. Be yourself. That's all I want. Against her better judgment, Ayana agreed. The Plaza Hotel was like something from another world. Doormen in uniforms, crystal chandeliers, and people dripping with jewelry and designer clothes. Elias met her in the lobby, handsome in a classic tuxedo. I look like I don't belong here, she replied honestly. He offered his arm. You belong wherever you choose to be. The ballroom was filled with New York's elite. Old money, new money, celebrities and politicians. Elias, there you are, called a striking woman in her 50s, approaching them. And who is this? Mother, this is Dr. Ayana Brooks, Elias said. Ayana, my mother, Victoria North. Ayana froze. Your mother? But I thought that she was dead, Victoria finished with a cold smile. A common misconception. One my son seems to find useful in certain... Elias's jaw tightened. Mother, not now. It was lovely to meet you, Dr. Brooks, Victoria said, her eyes saying the opposite. Do enjoy the evening. As she walked away, Ayana turned to Elias, hurt and confusion washing over her. Ayana, I can explain. You lied to me. The betrayal stung worse than she could have imagined. Not here, Elias said, noticing people watching them. Please. He led her to a quiet anteroom off the main ballroom. Once they were alone, Ayana crossed her arms. I'm listening. Elias ran a hand through his hair. And your real mother? Everything I told you about her was true, he said quietly. Then why didn't you correct Victoria just now? Because she's been my mother in the public eye for so long that it's easier to let people think what they want. Ayana wanted to believe him, but doubt had crept in. Before he could answer, the door opened. Cassandra, Elias said stiffly, this is Dr. Ayana Brooks. Cassandra's perfect eyebrows rose slightly. The community health doctor? How charitable of you, Elias. Ayana felt her cheeks burn. Ayana is my guest, Cassandra, Elias said, his tone warning. Of course she is, Cassandra replied with a practiced smile. Well, don't be too long, the board is waiting. Who was that? Cassandra Winters. Her father is on my board. We dated briefly last year. Briefly? 3 months. It was nothing serious. It seemed serious to her. Elias sighed. Can we please get back to what's important here? Yes. Victoria is my stepmother. Ayana wanted to believe him, but the evening had shaken her. I need some air, she said, moving toward the door. Ayana, please. Just give me a minute, Elias. She found her way to a balcony overlooking the city. New York sparkled below her, beautiful but untouchable, like Elias himself. A few minutes later, he joined her at the railing. I'm sorry, he said simply. For what exactly? She asked, not looking at him. For bringing you into this world without warning you what it's like. I don't care about your money or your status, Elias. I care about honesty. My last relationship ended because he lied to me about everything. I promised myself I wouldn't go through that again. For not telling you everything. She finally turned to him. Elias reached for her hand. This time she didn't pull away. Ask me anything. No more secrets. Because you see the world as it should be, not as it is. Because when I'm with you, I remember who I wanted to be before all this. He gestured to the gala behind them. Why me? Really? He smiled softly. Because when you spoke at that conference, it was like hearing my own conscience out loud. And who was that? Someone who makes a difference, not just a businessman, but a force for change. Ayana studied his face, looking for any sign of deception. She found none. I'm falling in love with you, Ayana, he said quietly. And it terrifies me. The words hung between them, honest and vulnerable. We believe healthcare should serve the people who need it most, not just those who can afford it. Before she could respond, his assistant appeared at the door. Mr. North, you're needed for the presentation. Elias didn't move. Tell them to wait. Sir, The mayor is asking for you specifically." He sighed and turned to Ayanna. "We're not done with this conversation." And if she was, what then? Their worlds couldn't be more different. She was falling for him, had already fallen if she was honest with herself. But their worlds remained galaxies apart. She hadn't meant to stay, but their conversation had lasted until dawn. They had talked about everything: his childhood before his father's success, her parents' influence on her career choice, their fears and hopes for whatever was growing between them. "Go," she said. "Do your billionaire thing, I'll be here. You running a global company, me treating patients who can't afford their medications." After he left, Ayanna leaned against the railing, her mind racing. Was she falling in love with him too? Together? From the ballroom she heard applause, then Elias's voice over the speakers announcing a $50 million initiative for community health centers in underserved areas nationwide. Victoria North made her disapproval clear, telling Society columnists that Elias was going through a phase. "Getting cozy with the billionaire," one doctor commented within her hearing. "Smart career move." The board members whispered that he was becoming distracted from the company's core mission. They built their own world between his universe and hers, a place where they were just Elias and Ayanna, not a CEO and a doctor, not rich and middle class, just two people who understood each other in ways no one else did. They talked every day, sometimes for hours. "The program will be modeled after the successful approach developed by Dr. Ayanna Brooks in Detroit," he was saying, and started a transportation service for patients who couldn't reach the clinic on their own. "They don't care about helping people. They just want their stock options to keep climbing." Her own words from the conference, now backed by millions of dollars. Tears pricked at her eyes. "Fight," he said finally. "I still own 30% of the company. They can't remove me without a major battle." Led by dear old Dad and Cassandra's father. The bitterness in his voice was palpable. "They say my recent initiatives are hurting shareholder value, that I've lost focus." When Elias found her again, his face was anxious. "Are we okay?" Instead of answering, Ayanna stepped forward and kissed him. It was their first kiss, soft at first, then deeper as he pulled her close. He was willing to risk everything: his company, his fortune, his legacy, for his principles, for the vision they shared. Victoria's voice was ice. "My stepson is about to destroy everything his father and I built, and you're the cause. I think you're giving me too much credit." When they finally broke apart, she whispered, "We're okay. But this, us, it won't be easy." Now he's talking about healthcare equality and corporate responsibility. All very noble, I'm sure, but terrible for business. "Nothing worthwhile ever is," he replied, holding her tight as the New York skyline twinkled around them. The next morning, Ayanna woke in Elias's penthouse apartment. Victoria North, elegant in a designer suit that cost more than Ayanna's monthly salary, sat primly in the waiting room. Now, standing at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, she felt a strange mix of excitement and trepidation. "I'm not with Elias for what he can give me." Name it. A new clinic? Men like Elias always keep their options open. A research grant? A position at a prestigious hospital? Whatever it is, I can make it happen. Elias joined her at the window, handing her a cup of coffee. "Penny for your thoughts?" "Just wondering how this works," she said. "You hear me in Detroit, what's wrong?" He set down his coffee and took both her hands. "We'll figure it out. Before you get too righteous, you might want to look at these." The date stamp showed they were taken just last week, when Elias had told Ayanna he was in meetings all day. For the next 2 months, they did just that. Elias traveled to Detroit whenever he could. Ayanna flew to New York 1 weekend a month. I was trying to convince her to talk to him to make him see reason. The North Foundation's grant transformed Ayanna's clinic. They hired more community health workers, expanded their hours. He sighed. "Ayanna, what's this really about?" She sent a text with the simple question, "Where were you last Tuesday?" Meanwhile, North Biotech announced a new line of affordable medications, generic versions of their own patented drugs, priced at cost for community clinics. When Ayanna questioned the business logic, Elias just smiled. "Some things matter more than profit margins." They should have made her happy. Instead, they just confused her more. But not everyone was happy about their relationship. If Elias was lying to her, playing some game, she wanted no part of it. Her ex had lied so convincingly, had made her feel so special while betraying her trust. She was not going to be another conquest, another charity case, another distraction from his privileged life. In Detroit, some of Ayana's colleagues questioned her motives. The rumors hurt, but when they were together, none of it seemed to matter. Then came the board meeting that changed everything. But her mind kept returning to Elias, to Victoria's photos, to the impossible distance between their worlds. Elias called her late one night, his voice tight with anger. "They're trying to push me out." "What? Who?" The blonde woman looked around the modest space with poorly disguised disdain. "You need to end things with Elias. The board." "Because of me," Ayana said, her stomach sinking. "Because I'm finally doing something meaningful with all this power," he corrected her. Cassandra laughed. "Elias and I have history, deep history. What we have is complicated." "No. 3 months isn't brief when you've known each other since childhood. Our families have always expected us to end up together. I'm here on my own, woman to woman." "What will you do?" "Causes. Last year it was microfinance in Africa. Before that, clean water initiatives. Now it's you and your community clinics. I'm not the villain here, Dr. Brooks. I'm trying to save you from what comes next." A text from Elias. "Just landed. Coming to see you now." There was a long silence. "And if you lose?" "Then one morning you'll wake up and find he's already chasing the next exciting challenge." She stood smoothing her designer dress. "Ask yourself, how many of his previous passions are still part of his life? That you'll get bored and move on. Then I walk away, start something new, something better." The confidence in his voice both thrilled and frightened her, but Elias North isn't capable of the kind of commitment you deserve. For her. 2 days later, Ayana received an unexpected visitor at her clinic. "Mrs. North," Ayana said, surprised. "What brings you to Detroit?" First Victoria, now Cassandra, both warning her away from Elias, both claiming to know him better than she did. "I think you know perfectly well, Dr. Brooks." Ayana led her to a private office, away from curious ears. "Don't play modest," Victoria snapped. "Before he met you, Elias was focused, practical. If helping people is bad for business, maybe the business model is the problem." Victoria's perfect smile didn't reach her eyes. "Let me be direct. What's your price?" Ayana blinked. "Excuse me?" "To walk away from Elias." Anger flared in Ayana's chest. "There is no price, Mrs. North. Everyone has a price, dear." Victoria opened her handbag and removed a folder. Inside were photos. Elias and Cassandra at a restaurant, their heads close together. "He's playing you," Victoria said coolly. Ayana stared at the photos, a cold feeling spreading through her chest. "Think about my offer," Victoria said, standing to leave. "I'll be in town until tomorrow." After Victoria left, Ayana cancelled her afternoon appointments and went home. She tried calling Elias but got his voicemail. No response. By evening, her hurt had hardened into resolve. When her phone finally rang at midnight, she almost didn't answer. "Ayana," Elias said when she picked up. "I just saw your message. I was in board meetings all day." "Were you with Cassandra last Tuesday?" she asked directly. There was a pause. "Yes." The simple admission hurt more than she expected. "I can explain," he continued quickly. "Her father is key to this board fight. And you couldn't tell me this because it was a long shot, and I didn't want to worry you with the board politics. Your stepmother paid me a visit today, offered to buy me off." "She what?" His voice turned cold. "I'll deal with her. She also showed me photos of you and Cassandra looking very cozy." "Photos can be misleading," he said. "Nothing happened. Nothing would ever happen." "I love you, Ayana." It was the first time he'd said those words so directly. "I don't know what to believe anymore, Elias." "Believe in us," he said simply. "I'm flying to Detroit first thing tomorrow. We'll talk then." After they hung up, Ayana sat in the dark, thinking. She wanted to believe him. But Victoria's visit had awakened all her old insecurities. Was she making the same mistake again? The next morning, Ayana went to work early, hoping to lose herself in patient care. Around noon, Shanice knocked on her office door. "Dr. Brooks, there's someone here to see you." Ayana expected Elias. Instead, she found Cassandra Winters in her waiting room, looking as out of place in her designer clothes as a peacock in a parking lot. "Dr. Brooks," Cassandra said with a tight smile, "may we speak privately?" This day just kept getting better. Ayana led Cassandra to her small office, closing the door behind them. "I'll get right to the point," Cassandra said, not waiting for an invitation to sit. Ayana crossed her arms. "Did Victoria send you too?" "Victoria? I'm listening." Cassandra perched on the edge of a chair, her red-soled heels tapping against the linoleum floor. "He told me you dated briefly last year. Is that what he called it?" Cassandra's perfectly lined lips curved into a smile. Ayana kept her face neutral, though her heart was racing. "What exactly do you want, Cassandra?" "I want you to understand who Elias really is." She leaned forward. "He gets these passions. And when he gets bored, he moves on." Cassandra's voice softened with practiced sympathy. "Which is, he'll promise you the world, change his whole life for you." The question hit harder than Ayana wanted to admit. "For what it's worth," Cassandra added, heading for the door, "I think what you're doing here is admirable." After Cassandra left, Ayana sat at her desk, her mind swirling. She was still sitting there when her phone buzzed. 30 minutes later, he walked into the clinic. Despite everything, her heart still skipped at the sight of him, tall, confident, those intense eyes finding her immediately. "Your ex-girlfriend paid me a visit," Ayana said, without preamble when they were alone in her office. Elias's expression darkened. "Cassandra was here? What did she want?" "To warn me that I'm just your latest passion project." He ran a hand through his hair in frustration. "That's not true. Your stepmother offered me money to leave you alone." "I'm not surprised. Victoria likes to control everything." He moved closer, reaching for her hands. "Ayana, none of that matters. I love you. Everyone says you'll get tired of me, of this world. I'm not going anywhere. Beyond the wealth and the power, beyond Victoria's manipulation and Cassandra's warning, to the man who had listened to her at that conference, who had shared meals in her city, who talked to her patients with genuine interest. She wanted to believe him, but doubt had crept in like a virus. "It's real, Ayana, we're real." Elias had loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, looking more relaxed than he had all day. "Everyone doesn't know me like you do." His eyes were earnest, pleading. "What do you think?" Scared of believing in something that can't last. Ayana looked at him, really looked. "I think I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared this is too good to be true." Elias pulled her into his arms. She let herself melt into his embrace, breathing in his familiar scent. "They're voting on whether to remove me as CEO. Whatever storm was coming, at least they'd face it together. I wanted to create medications that people could actually afford, treatments that reached everyone who needed them." Later that evening, they sat on the small balcony of her apartment, sharing takeout from her favorite Thai restaurant. His voice hardened, as if profit margins matter more than human lives. "My father still controls 20%, and he's aligned with the other board members." Elias's face was grim. "If they vote me out, I lose control of everything I've built." "I need to tell you something," he said, setting down his fork. "About the company. I don't know, start over, I guess. But it would mean losing billions in resources that could help people." Ayana tensed. "What is it?" "The board meeting is tomorrow. Elias would fly back to New York for the board meeting. The board meeting had started at 9 a.m. It was now past 3 and still no word. Ayana would stay in Detroit, focusing on her patients while waiting for news. He remarried quickly, reinvented himself as this titan of industry, and expected me to forget where we came from. "Can they do that? I thought you owned 30%. "It's complicated. Why would your own father do this?" Elias looked out at the Detroit skyline. "We haven't seen eye to eye since my mother died, my real mother. And you couldn't. Would you?" He turned back to her. The company was supposed to be different, but the morning news was full of speculation about Elias's next moves. Some financial analysts predicted he would sell his shares and walk away with billions. Was Cassandra right after all? Was she just another passing interest, forgotten now that he faced a real crisis? Others suggested he might start a new company to compete with North Biotech. His father, Richard North, would serve as interim CEO while a search commenced for a permanent replacement. There are rumors about the company's direction changing. Dr. Wilson looked concerned. What does this mean for our grant? And now? They're reviewing all grants in light of the leadership change. She fell into a restless sleep around dawn, worried and confused. Without that money. Now the board says our responsibility is to the shareholders, not to patients. Ayanna took his hand. What will you do if you lose? For the first time since she'd known him, Elias looked uncertain. I haven't heard from him in days. Money isn't everything, she said gently. He smiled sadly. Says the woman who could transform healthcare with even a fraction of what I might lose tomorrow. They talked late into the night, making plans and backup plans. Whatever happens, Elias promised as he left for the airport, we'll face it together. The next day dragged by endlessly. Ayanna checked her phone between patient appointments, but heard nothing from Elias. Elias was driving the company into the ground with his philanthropic obsessions. I came to discuss your clinic's funding. Around 4, Dr. Wilson appeared at her door. Ayanna, have you seen the news? I won't let him destroy himself over some infatuation with you and your causes. Richard and I will be making decisions about which initiatives to continue. Victoria handed her an envelope. Inside is a letter confirming continued funding for your clinic, $5 million over 5 years. All you have to do is sign the attached statement indicating you no longer wish to see Elias. Actually, I'm prepared to maintain your funding, on one condition. She shook her head. It's all over the financial channels. Elias North has been voted out as CEO of North Biotech. He just needs to be reminded of who he really is. The envelope sat unopened on her coffee table, a moral test in paper form. $5 million could transform her clinic, save lives, create programs that would last for years. Her heart sank. What? The stock is already dropping. Ayanna couldn't answer. She excused herself and tried calling Elias but got no response. She texted, I just heard. Are you okay? No reply. Where was he? Why hadn't he reached out? Was this silent treatment his way of telling her it was over? My father froze my accounts, had me escorted from the building like a criminal. Then the lawyers got involved. By evening, details had emerged. The board had voted 8-2 to remove Elias as CEO, citing strategic differences. Ayanna waited up all night, but Elias never called. You're right. I handled this all wrong. He spotted the envelope on her coffee table. What's that? Where have you been? I've been calling for days. Relief and anger mingled in her voice. $5 million for my clinic if I agree never to see you again. When she woke, there was still no message from him. And here I thought she'd given up on subtlety. What did you tell her? None of the scenarios mentioned her or Detroit or community healthcare. On whether you still want there to be an us. 3 days passed with no word from Elias. Ayanna alternated between worry and anger. Had he shut her out? I lost my company. My father betrayed me. And for a while, I thought I might have lost you too. On the 4th day, Dr. Wilson called her into his office again. The North Foundation called. A new company, new foundation. And I want you by my side, not as a cause or a project, but as my partner. In everything. All that money, all that power. It doesn't mean anything without you. What does that mean for us? Ayanna asked, though she already knew. It means our funding is in jeopardy. He looked defeated. We've already hired staff, Ayanna, started new programs. I'm asking if you'll let me join your world permanently, if you'll build something new with me, something that could change healthcare for real. I'll figure something out, she promised, though she had no idea how. When they finally broke apart, she was smiling through tears. I'm saying that whether I have billions or nothing, you're what matters most. That afternoon, As Ayana was leaving the clinic, a sleek black car pulled up beside her. The window rolled down to reveal Victoria North. "Get in, Dr. Brooks. We need to talk." Against her better judgment, Ayana climbed into the car. "But it's also a, I love you too." "I assume you've heard the news," Victoria said as the driver pulled away from the curb. "That your stepson was forced out of his own company?" "Yes, I heard." "You could have taken the money and still seen him secretly. I would never have known." Victoria's smile was cold. "It was necessary. For what? Some romantic notion that you and Elias belong together?" "Where is he?" Ayana demanded. "Licking his wounds, I imagine. Men hate to lose." Victoria studied her manicured nails. Ayana stiffened. "What about it?" The business press questioned his sanity for walking away from billions. Former colleagues whispered that he'd lost his edge. "The foundation is under new management now. He worked alongside Ayana, learning the realities of frontline healthcare, using his business expertise to, because the man I love is nothing like you think he is. And let me guess, our community health program isn't on the list." Victoria's smile widened. "They secured new funding from investors who shared their vision, not just their desire for profits." "Which is?" He moved to Detroit, buying a modest house near Ayana's neighborhood rather than a downtown penthouse. "Stay away from Elias permanently." Ayana stared at her in disbelief. "You can't be serious. He's vulnerable right now, angry, looking for ways to strike back at his father and me." Victoria's voice hardened. "You don't know anything about what's between us. I know my stepson. Once he realizes you've moved on, he'll come to his senses." Ayana's hand trembled as she took the envelope. $5 million would secure her clinic's future, help thousands of patients who desperately needed care. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "Because Elias has a destiny greater than playing savior to Detroit's poor." The car stopped in front of Ayana's apartment building. "Think about it," Victoria said. "Your patience or your romance? I need your answer by tomorrow." Alone in her apartment, Ayana paced back and forth. All she had to do was break Elias's heart, and her own. She tried calling him again. Still no answer. Exhausted, she finally fell asleep on the couch, the envelope still unopened. The next morning, she woke to pounding on her door. Disoriented, she stumbled to answer it. Elias stood there unshaven, his clothes wrinkled, dark circles under his eyes. "Elias, I know, I'm sorry." He looked terrible, but his eyes were clear. "Can I come in?" Once inside, he paced her small living room. "I should have called, I know that. But after the board vote, everything happened so fast. You couldn't find 5 seconds to text me that you were okay." He stopped pacing. Ayana sighed. "Your stepmother's latest attempt to separate us." To her surprise, Elias laughed, a genuine if tired laugh. "Nothing yet. She wants my answer today." He sat beside her on the couch. "And what will your answer be?" Ayana looked at him, really looked. Despite his disheveled appearance, there was something different about him, a lightness almost. "That depends," she said carefully. "Ayana." He took her hands. "These past few days have been the worst of my life." "You nearly did," she admitted. "When you disappeared, I started to believe what Cassandra said, that I was just your latest passion project." Pain flashed across his face. "I deserved that. But Ayana, losing the company made one thing crystal clear to me." He squeezed her hands. "Zelaya, I came here to tell you that I'm starting over." Hope fluttered in her chest. "What are you saying?" He pulled a small box from his pocket. "I'm saying I love you, Ayana Brooks." He opened the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. "I'm not asking you to leave Detroit or your patients." Ayana stared at the ring, speechless. "It's too soon," he said quickly, misinterpreting her silence. "I understand. After everything that's happened—" She cut him off with a kiss, fierce and certain. "Is that a yes?" he asked, looking younger and more vulnerable than she'd ever seen him. "It's a we have a lot to figure out first," she said honestly. Relief washed over his face. "That's all I need to hear." Later that day, Ayana personally delivered her response to Victoria North, who was staying at Detroit's most exclusive hotel. "I've made my decision," Ayana said, handing back the unopened envelope. Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. "You're declining $5 million? No, Ayanna replied calmly. For the knowledge that I don't sell my relationships to the highest bidder, and neither does your stepson." Victoria's mask slipped for a moment, revealing genuine confusion. "That's the difference between us, Mrs. North. I don't build my life on lies." As Ayanna turned to leave, Victoria called after her. "He'll come to his senses eventually. Men like Elias always do." Ayanna smiled. "For your sake, I hope you're wrong." The next few months were a whirlwind. True to his word, Elias started a new company, North Community Health Systems, with a focus on building and operating affordable clinics in underserved areas. Together, they redesigned her clinic's programs, using data to prove what Ayanna had always known, that community-based care delivered better outcomes at lower costs. Richard and Victoria North launched a public relations campaign against Elias, portraying him as a naive idealist who had been led astray by a woman with an agenda. Through it all, Elias remained steady, solve practical problems rather than chase stock prices. Their wedding was small, held in Ayanna's father's old church, with Shanice as her maid of honor and only a handful of guests. No press, no society photographers, no North family members in attendance. Ayanna asked him that night as they danced slowly in their new backyard, string lights twinkling above them. "Giving up your empire for this? Are you sure you don't regret it?" Elias looked around at their modest home, then back at her. "I didn't give up an empire, I found one." He kissed her softly. "Everything I've ever wanted is right here." Their model was working, patients were healthier, costs were lower, and communities were thriving. 6 months after their wedding, North Community Health Systems had opened 5 new clinics across Detroit. Then came the call that changed everything again. Elias was in his home office when his assistant patched through an unexpected caller, his father, Richard North. "Elias," the older man said, his voice strained, "we need to talk." "I think we said everything that needed saying at the board meeting, Dad." "This isn't about that, it's about the company." Richard paused. "North Biotech is in trouble, because despite everything, it's still your name on the building." Richard's voice dropped. "Because I was wrong, son, about a lot of things." Elias sat up straighter. "What kind of trouble?" "The FDA is investigating our new heart medication. There are irregularities in the trial data. Stock is plummeting. Investors are panicking. And you're calling me because..." "If it collapsed, patients worldwide would suffer. Not just shareholders, but patients who depend on those medications. Then you already know what you have to do. Because you're still the largest individual shareholder." After the call, Elias sat in silence. North Biotech employed thousands of people. Its medications, despite their cost, saved lives. His father stood, offering a hand that Elias didn't take. When Ayanna came home, he told her everything. "Purpose." Elias opened his briefcase. "Here's my proposal. I'll return as CEO. I'll bring my team to address the FDA concerns. I'll use my shares to stabilize the stock price." "What are you going to do?" she asked. "Take them, or find someone else to save your company." "Let me be clear about why I'm here. I don't care about your stock options. I don't care about your bonuses. I care about saving this company so it can continue developing life-saving medications." Board members shouted objections. Victoria turned white with anger. He had won the battle that mattered most. "I don't know," he admitted. "Part of me wants to let them sink. The board will be restructured to include patient advocates and healthcare providers. You, Dr. Brooks North, are looking at the new CEO of North Biotech, and its newest board member is you. And Dr. Ayanna Brooks North will lead our new Community Impact Division with a seat on the board. After what my father did, what the board did. But the other part? Surprisingly, yes, I think nearly losing everything made him reassess some things." He kissed her forehead. "He asked to meet you, properly this time. We're going to rebuild that company from the inside out. Make it what it should have been all along, a force for good. The other part knows that people will be hurt if North Biotech fails." Ayanna took his hand. The next morning, Elias called his father back. "I'll help," he said, "but on my terms." 2 days later, he walked back into the North Biotech headquarters for the first time since being forced out. The boardroom fell silent as he entered. He shrugged. She'll either adapt or be left behind. Everything I'm doing, everything I'm fighting for, it started that day in Boston when you stood up and spoke your truth. Gentlemen, ladies, Elias said, taking a position at the head of the table. He placed a hand gently on her stomach. I was thinking about names. You've been tired lately. I was going to take a test tomorrow. I didn't want to say anything until I was sure. Nauseous in the mornings. I noticed, even if you haven't said anything. Victoria, seated beside Richard, rolled her eyes. Always the idealist. Not idealism, Victoria. From that first confrontation at a healthcare conference to partners in reshaping one of the world's largest biotech companies. The relief around the table was palpable. This time they arrived together. Elias in a simple suit, Ayanna in a flowing dress that elegantly concealed her small baby bump. But they'll also understand where we came from, the struggles that shaped us. In exchange, he continued, North Biotech will create an affordable medications division, selling our drugs at cost to community clinics nationwide. They'll know their grandmother was a nurse who served others, that their grandfather was a preacher who fought for justice. Chaos erupted. Ayanna felt a flutter in her stomach, partly nerves, partly the baby making its presence known. At 5 months pregnant, she had finally started to show, though her elegant navy dress concealed it well enough that only those who knew were aware. There would be resistance, setbacks, enemies both old and new. The audience, healthcare executives, tech entrepreneurs, policymakers, and community advocates, fell silent in anticipation. A family built on truth, justice, and the courage to speak up when it mattered most. Whatever challenges awaited them, they would face them together. The doctor and the billionaire who had found common ground in the most unexpected way. Elias quoted, meeting Ayanna's eyes. Those words didn't just challenge me professionally, they changed the course of my life. But for the first time, she truly believed they could change things, not just for themselves, but for all the patients who had been left behind by a broken system. Richard North raised his hand for silence. What you're asking for is unprecedented. And the community doctor who had upended the industry's approach to underserved communities. The story of their relationship and Elias's dramatic return to North Biotech had made headlines for months. Beside her sat Dr. Wilson, who had initially been skeptical of Elias's intentions, but was now one of their strongest advocates. Elias's father had been making halting attempts at reconciliation over the past few months. He'd even visited their home in Detroit once, awkwardly asking Ayanna about the pregnancy and offering to set up a trust fund for the baby, an offer they had politely declined. What began as a confrontation evolved into a partnership. After failing to prevent Elias's return to North Biotech, she had retreated to their home in the Hamptons, refusing to acknowledge her stepson's new wife or the changes at the company. We're here today to announce the next phase of our work. Not just between two people, but between two approaches to healthcare that had been kept separate for too long. It comes from listening to the people most affected by the problems we're trying to solve. Today, we're launching a $10 billion fund to revolutionize how healthcare is delivered in America. And we're inviting everyone in this room to be part of it. So is this crisis, Elias replied calmly. Those are my terms. After her failed attempt to separate them, Cassandra had made peace with the new reality, especially once her father became an unexpected ally on the restructured board. But we know that the solutions won't come from doing things the way they've always been done. The board members looked to Richard, who studied his son with new eyes. You've changed. Patient outcomes have improved by 38%, while costs have decreased by 22%. Yes, Elias agreed. I found something worth fighting for. After hours of heated debate, the board voted, narrowly, to accept Elias's conditions. Victoria stormed out, threatening legal action. Several board members resigned in protest. Elias didn't care. That evening, he returned home to find Ayanna waiting anxiously. Well, she asked. What happened? He grinned, looking more like the confident CEO she'd first met. She laughed in disbelief. They actually agreed to everything? They didn't have a choice. He pulled her close. "But this is just the beginning. Your father went along with this." Elias's expression softened. "And Victoria? Currently plotting our downfall, I'm sure." Ayana leaned against him, taking it all in. "So what happens now? Do we move to New York?" "No," he said firmly. "We stay right here. I'll commute when necessary. North Biotech is opening a Detroit office, part of our new community focus. You really have thought of everything. I learned from the best." He cupped her face gently. Ayana smiled. "When I spoke." "When you spoke," he echoed, "and I finally listened." As they stood together in their modest home, far from the gleaming towers of Manhattan, Ayana marveled at how far they had come. It wouldn't be easy. That night, as they lay in bed, Elias whispered, "I have something to tell you." "More corporate drama?" she asked sleepily. "No." Ayana's eyes flew open. "Names? For what?" His smile was tender. She sat up, heart racing. "Whether it's true now or sometime in the future," he said, "I want you to know that our child will have everything we didn't. Security, opportunity, love." Tears filled Ayana's eyes. "And they'll know their mother changed the world by speaking truth to power," Elias added, pulling her close, "even when that power was their father." As they drifted to sleep, Ayana thought about the journey ahead, not just leading a division of North Biotech or expanding their community clinics, but creating a family together. She placed her hand over Elias's, still resting on her stomach. The National Healthcare Innovation Conference was back in Boston, exactly 1 year after Ayana and Elias first met. As they entered the grand ballroom of the Boston Waterfront Hotel, heads turned. "Ready for this?" Elias asked, squeezing her hand. Ayana smiled. "Always." Together they walked toward the stage where they would deliver the keynote address, not as doctor and CEO, but as partners in a revolution that was just beginning. The lights dimmed and the audience fell silent, waiting to hear what they would say next. The spotlight found them as they walked onto the stage of the National Healthcare Innovation Conference. Elias squeezed her hand before they separated to take their positions at the twin podiums. "1 year ago," Elias began, his deep voice carrying through the ballroom, "I sat in this very room as a CEO who thought he understood healthcare." He paused, looking over at Ayana with a small smile. And then Dr. Ayana Brooks stood up and spoke a truth that changed everything. A ripple of recognition moved through the crowd. Their story had become something of a legend in healthcare circles. The billionaire, "If we keep designing systems for the people funding them, instead of the people suffering under them, nothing will ever change." Ayana stepped forward to her microphone. Over the next hour, they took turns explaining the new model they had pioneered. Community clinics supported by cutting-edge research, medications priced according to ability to pay, technology designed with input from the patients who would use it. North Community Health Systems now operates 15 clinics across 4 states, Elias explained. And North Biotech's new community access program has made life-saving medications available to over 100,000 patients who previously couldn't afford them, Ayana added. From her seat in the front row, Shanice, now the National Director of Community Health Workers for their company, beamed with pride. As Ayana spoke about their future plans for expansion, she spotted Richard North slipping into the back of the room. Victoria was notably absent. "But the most important lesson we've learned," Elias continued, bringing Ayana's attention back to the present, "is that meaningful change doesn't come from boardrooms or policy papers alone." A round of applause interrupted him. From her podium, Ayana could see Cassandra Winters in the middle of the audience, clapping with a tight smile. As the applause died down, Ayana stepped forward again. On the screen behind them, a map of the United States appeared, with dots indicating their current clinics and planned expansions. The North Brooks Health Initiative, she continued, revealing the name for the first time, will establish 50 new community health centers in the most underserved areas of the country over the next 5 years. More applause, stronger this time. "But we're not stopping there," Elias added. The buzz in the audience grew louder. "We don't have all the answers," Ayana said, her voice strong and clear. "They'll come from brave people willing to speak up, to challenge the status quo and to put patients before profits. As they concluded their presentation, the audience rose in a standing ovation. Elias stepped around the podiums to join Ayana at center stage, taking her hand and raising it slightly as they acknowledged the applause. In that moment, with the lights bright and the crowd on their feet, Ayana felt a sense of completion. The journey that had begun with her speaking out at last year's conference had come full circle. "We have time for a few questions from the audience." The moderator approached with a microphone. Hands shot up around the room. The moderator pointed to a young doctor in a hijab near the front. "Dr. Brooks North, as a woman of color in healthcare leadership, what advice would you give to others trying to make their voices heard in rooms where they're often the only one?" Ayana smiled. "Sometimes they come from unexpected places. Speak your truth, even when your voice shakes. How do you explain that to skeptical shareholders? Especially when your voice shakes." Healthcare executives who had once dismissed Ayana now sought her advice. Tech entrepreneurs who had courted Elias for his money now pitched ideas for serving the communities they had previously ignored. "Our new model has opened markets we never reached before, created patient loyalty that's unmatched in the industry." "That was quite a presentation," he said, addressing them both though his eyes lingered on Elias, "and attracted the best talent who want to be part of something meaningful. The people who need to hear it will listen." "Victoria sends her regards," he said, though everyone knew it was a lie. She glanced at Elias, who nodded with understanding. "And find allies," she added. "What you're building is important." The next question came from an older man in an expensive suit, a pharmaceutical executive judging by his badge. "Perhaps dinner when we're back in Detroit?" "Mr. North, your company's stock has actually increased since you implemented these community programs, despite initial predictions of financial disaster." Elias leaned into the microphone. "By reminding them that doing good and doing well aren't mutually exclusive, I should let you get back to your admirers. We'll talk soon." The questions continued, about financing models, technology integration, policy implications. "We should go soon if we want to make our dinner reservation." Ayana and Elias answered as a team, sometimes finishing each other's thoughts, their different perspectives strengthening their responses. After the formal session ended, they were surrounded by well-wishers and potential partners. As the crowd around them thinned, Richard North approached hesitantly. "The work isn't easy, but it matters." "That's exactly what I tell myself on the hard days. You've inspired a whole generation, you know." "Thank you for coming," Elias replied formally. Richard's gaze dropped to Ayana's midsection, where her hand rested protectively. Ayana summoned a polite smile. "That's kind of her." As they settled into the back seat, Ayana leaned against Elias's shoulder. An awkward silence fell between them. "I'm proud of you, son," Richard finally said, the words clearly difficult for him. Surprise flickered across Elias's face. "That means a lot, Dad." Richard nodded, then stepped back. "We'd like that," Ayana said, placing a hand on Elias's arm. "I'd like that," Richard echoed, a hint of genuine warmth in his eyes before he turned and walked away. "That was unexpected," Elias murmured as they watched his father leave. "People can surprise you," Ayana replied. "Some of them, anyway." But lately, Ayana had been imagining a daughter, a little girl with Elias's intensity and her own quiet determination. As the conference reception continued around them, Elias checked his watch. Ayana nodded, but as they started to leave, a young woman approached them, dressed in scrubs with a hospital ID still clipped to her pocket. "Dr. Brooks North, I'm sorry to bother you, but I just finished my shift and rushed over when I heard you were speaking." Elias had arranged for them to have the same corner table, a sentimental gesture that had touched Ayana deeply. "Maybe it's time to build a leadership team that can run more of the day-to-day operations." "It's no bother," Ayana assured her. "I'm a resident at Boston General, in the community health track. I just wanted to thank you. Your work is the reason I chose this path." Unlike last time when Elias had chosen it to impress her with his knowledge of his mother's culture, now it was simply their favorite place to eat in Boston, a small piece of home when they traveled. That Elias thought he had to do everything himself. This one knows better. "Personally," he took her hand, "after the baby comes after the expansion, Mr. Bekele led them to the corner table, already set with traditional Ethiopian coffee service. If I'd just sat quietly like everyone expected? "And how is the little one?" he asked, gesturing to Ayana's stomach. "What do you want our life to look like? From adversaries to allies to partners to family." The city lights reflected in the puddles, creating a magical effect around them. Ayana felt a wave of emotion. "What's your name?" "I think we would have found each other eventually. I don't want to build a system without you. I want to build a life. Some connections are inevitable." He patted Elias on the shoulder before leaving them to look at menus they had memorized months ago. Maya Patel. Between integrating their companies, planning their healthcare initiative, and preparing for the baby, they had barely had time to breathe. "Well, Maya Patel, keep going." The young doctor beamed. They would raise their child between Detroit and New York, making sure she understood both worlds. From here, she could see the conference center where they had first met, its windows still lit as the day's final sessions concluded. He had insisted her name come first, saying, "It all started with you." They would teach her to speak up for what was right, even when it was difficult. And they would show her, through their example, that love could bridge any divide. After Maya left, Elias put his arm around Ayana's shoulders. "Tell me what you see. What are you thinking about?" he asked, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his hands meeting over their child. "I see our clinics transforming communities. I see us, growing old together, still fighting for what matters." "You'll find your voice too," she whispered, "and we'll be right here listening. I never believed in any of that until you." "We have," she corrected him. "This was never just about me." But they had done it, step by step, word by word, choice by choice. They made their way through the hotel lobby, where the same crystal chandeliers hung that had been there a year ago, but everything else had changed. "You need your rest. They need to hear your voice," he had said. The baby had been active all night, as if excited for the day ahead. "It's not often we get this kind of peace. Though I'm sure you'll go off script as usual. Just yours. Big day tomorrow." "I'll be back before you go on," he promised, kissing her quickly before hurrying off. Outside, a light rain was falling. Their driver opened an umbrella and escorted them to the waiting car. She tried calling him, but it went straight to voicemail. "Brooks North?" A conference organizer approached. "We're ready for you in the main ballroom." "Tired?" he asked, stroking her hair. "A little. Good tired, though. The closing reception follows your speech, and the hotel needs to reset the room." He placed his hand over hers on her rounded belly. "How's our little activist doing?" As if in response, the baby kicked against his palm. They both laughed. "Active, like her mother," Ayana said. "Her? You think it's a girl now?" The speech was important, not just a recap of their initiatives, but a call to action for the entire healthcare industry to fundamentally rethink its approach to underserved communities. Just a feeling. They had decided not to learn the baby's sex, preferring to be surprised, to share stories of how their work had influenced community healthcare across the country. The car moved through the rainy Boston streets toward the restaurant where they had their first real conversation a year ago. "I was thinking," he said as they drove, "about what comes next. 50 new clinics isn't enough for you," she teased. "I mean for us." Ayana considered the question. Their past year had been a whirlwind of professional triumphs and personal joy, but also exhausting. "I want balance," she said finally. "I want to keep doing the work that matters, but I also want time, real time, with you and our child." Elias nodded. "I've been thinking the same thing. Letting go of control. That doesn't sound like the Elias North I first met," she teased. "I'm not the same man you met," he said seriously. The car pulled up to the small Ethiopian restaurant. Inside, the owner recognized them immediately. "Ah, my favorite couple returns." "Very active," she replied with a smile. "Good. Strong like both parents." As they shared injera bread and spicy stews, just as they had on their first real date, Ayana thought about how far they had come. "Do you ever wonder," she asked, "what would have happened if I hadn't spoken up that day?" Elias considered this as he poured more water for her. "The romantic billionaire," she teased. "Who would have thought?" "Certainly not me," he admitted. After dinner, they walked arm in arm through the light rain to a nearby park, the same one where they had walked the night before Ayanna returned to Detroit a year ago. "I have something for you," Elias said, reaching into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a small envelope. "What's this?" Ayanna asked, opening it carefully. Inside was a handwritten note on cream-colored stationery. "I stepped away from the board. I chose your truth over my legacy." Ayanna recognized the words immediately. They were what Elias had written to her after that first conference, the note that had been delivered just before her closing speech. "You kept this all this time?" she asked, touched. "It was the most honest thing I'd ever written," he said, "and every word is still true." She stood on tiptoe to kiss him, the rain falling gently around them. "I love you, Elias North. And I love you, Ayanna Brooks North." They walked back to their hotel, talking about the future, not just of their companies or initiatives, but of their family. Back in their hotel suite, Ayanna stepped out onto the balcony while Elias took a shower. Her phone buzzed with a text from Shanice. "You two killed it today. The North Brooks Health Initiative is already trending online." Ayanna smiled. The name had been Elias's idea, combining their surnames to represent their united vision. As she stood looking out at the city, her hand resting on her growing belly, Ayanna felt the baby kick again. Elias joined her on the balcony, his hair still damp from the shower. "The future," she said, leaning back against him. "Our future." He murmured against her hair. "I see our baby growing up strong and compassionate." "Sounds perfect," he said. As they stood together in the gentle rain, Ayanna thought about all the moments that had led them here, every challenge they had overcome, every compromise they had reached, every truth they had spoken. It hadn't been an easy road. There had been moments of doubt, of fear, of wondering if the gap between their worlds was too wide to bridge. "We should go inside," Elias said after a while. Tomorrow was the final day of the conference, and Ayanna was delivering the closing address, alone this time at Elias's insistence. "5 more minutes," she said, savoring the moment. He chuckled. "Enjoy it while it lasts. Once this little one arrives, peace will be in short supply." "I can't wait," she said honestly. The next morning, Ayanna prepared for her speech, while Elias handled calls from their Detroit office. "Your speech is ready," Elias said, handing her a folder. She grinned. "You know me too well. That's why I love you." They arrived at the conference center early. Unlike the previous year, when Ayanna had been just another attendee, now people stopped to greet her, to thank her. An hour before her speech, Elias was called away to deal with an urgent issue involving one of their clinics in Detroit. Ayanna found a quiet corner to review her notes one last time. As the minutes ticked by, Elias didn't return. Ayanna checked her phone. No messages. "Doctor, my husband isn't back yet," Ayanna said, trying to hide her concern. "I'm sorry, but we're on a tight schedule." Ayanna nodded. Of course, I'm ready." As she walked toward the ballroom, she felt a flutter of nerves. Despite all her professional accomplishments over the past year, despite addressing rooms full of executives and policymakers, speaking still made her anxious. Elias usually calmed her before big presentations, reminding her of why her voice mattered. But today, she would have to find that calm within herself. The ballroom was packed, even more crowded than for their joint keynote the day before. As Ayanna made her way to the side of the stage, the moderator was already introducing her. A pioneer in community healthcare whose innovative approaches have transformed how we think about serving vulnerable populations. Please welcome Dr. Ayanna Brooks North. Applause filled the room as Ayanna stepped onto the stage. She took her place at the podium, adjusting the microphone slightly as she set down her notes. Looking out at the sea of faces, she couldn't help searching for Elias. He wasn't there. An aide hurried in and handed something to one of the conference organizers, who immediately made her way toward the stage. "1 year ago, I stood up in a room much like this one and spoke a truth that many didn't want to hear." The organizer reached the steps to the stage and held out a sealed envelope. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady despite her disappointment. As she continued her speech, The door at the back of the ballroom opened. Ayanna tried to maintain her focus, but it was difficult with the distraction. "I was told to give you this immediately." This time her eyes found him, standing quietly at the back of the auditorium, just as he had been the day they met. He nodded slightly, encouraging her to continue. "I chose your truth over my legacy." Sorry for the interruption, but her eyes were fixed on Elias, who waited patiently by the exit. "As I was saying," she asked when she finally reached him, "I wanted to remind you, and myself, of where we started, of the moment everything changed." The note, the dramatic timing? "I have news," he whispered. Ayanna smiled, acknowledging their response with a small bow before leaving the stage. "I don't want to build a system without you. I want to build a life. The governor wants to partner with us on a statewide healthcare initiative. If it works, it could become a national model." Who was watching her with pride from the back of the room. "Do you ever miss it?" she asked suddenly. "I'm sorry to interrupt, Dr. Brooks North," she whispered. "If you'll excuse me for just a moment," she said to the audience as she stepped back from the microphone. "The penthouse, the private jets, the board meetings in Tokyo." Confused, Ayanna took the envelope. "I miss the convenience sometimes," he admitted, "and occasionally the food." They both laughed. But instead of the usual car, there was a familiar red Ferrari parked at the curb. "I thought we could drive ourselves to the airport, like normal people. But no, I don't miss the life. It was empty in all the ways that matter. Everything we talked about, everything we dreamed of, it's really happening." Inside was a handwritten note in Elias's familiar script. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened the envelope. "I stepped away from the board. 1 year ago, I was leaving this conference alone, wondering if I'd ever see you again. Now look at us." The same words from the note he had given her the night before, the same words he had written a year ago. Puzzled, Ayanna looked up from the letter and scanned the room again. With renewed confidence, Ayanna returned to the microphone. After it's born, she said she's been thinking about legacy, family. She delivered the rest of her speech with passion and clarity, never referring to the note but drawing strength from it, and from the man who had written it. "I don't know, but I think she deserves a chance, don't you? The city where a doctor had dared to speak truth to power and a billionaire had chosen to listen. Everyone can change. We're proof of that." So much had changed since that first contentious meeting. Both of them had grown, compromised, found new versions of themselves in their relationship. When she finished, the audience rose in a standing ovation. When he emerged a few minutes later, his expression was thoughtful. This was where they belonged, not in separate worlds, but in the one they had created together, bridging gaps that had seemed unbridgeable. Who had built a love strong enough to change not just their own lives, but the lives of countless others. As the crowd dispersed for the closing reception, she made her way through the ballroom, accepting congratulations and well wishes. It had begun with her voice, with the courage to speak when silence would have been easier. "What was that about?" he smiled. "You nearly gave me a heart attack," she scolded, but without heat. "I thought something had happened." There would be new challenges, new battles, new moments when speaking truth would require courage. "Something did happen," he said, taking her hand. "You spoke and the world listened, just like last year." As they walked toward the reception, surrounded by people eager to speak with them, Elias leaned close to her ear. "What kind of news?" "The urgent issue in Detroit. It wasn't a problem, it was an opportunity." His eyes were bright with excitement. Ayanna's breath caught. "That's incredible." "It's happening, Ayanna." As they joined the reception, moving from group to group, Ayanna felt a deep sense of rightness. Later that evening, as they prepared to leave Boston and return to their home in Detroit, Ayanna paused in the hotel lobby. "Miss what?" "Your old life." Elias considered the question seriously. As they stepped outside, their driver was waiting to take them to the airport. "What's this?" Ayanna asked, surprised. "A little nostalgia," Elias explained. "Normal people don't drive Ferraris, Elias." He shrugged, grinning. "I never claimed to be completely reformed." The sports car was one of the few luxuries he had kept from his previous life, though now it spent most of its time in the garage while they drove a more practical SUV around Detroit. As they settled into the Ferrari, Elias turned to her. Ayana placed her hand over his on the gearshift. "Now look at us," she echoed. They drove through the streets of Boston, the city where their story had begun. At the airport, they bypassed the main terminal. Despite Ayana's initial reluctance, they still occasionally used Elias's private jet, especially now that the pregnancy made commercial travel more uncomfortable. As they boarded the plane, Elias's phone rang. He checked the caller ID and frowned slightly. "Victoria," he said, showing Ayana the screen. "You should take it," she encouraged him. "Maybe she's finally ready to talk." Elias nodded and answered the call, stepping into the jet's small conference room for privacy. "Everything okay?" Ayana asked as the plane prepared for takeoff. "She wants to meet the baby," he said, still sounding surprised. "Do you believe her?" He sat beside her, buckling his seatbelt. Ayana squeezed his hand. "Yes, we are." As the jet lifted into the evening sky, they looked out the window at Boston growing smaller below them. "Home?" Elias asked, though he already knew the answer. "Home," Ayana confirmed, resting her head on his shoulder as they flew toward Detroit, toward their future, toward the life they were building together, word by word, day by day, choice by choice. In the soft light of the cabin, with her husband beside her and their child growing within her, Ayana thought about the journey that had brought them here. But it had continued because of something even more powerful than words: the willingness to listen, to change, to build bridges across divides that seemed impossible to cross. As the plane soared through the night sky, carrying them home, Ayana knew that their story was just beginning. But they would face them together, the doctor and the billionaire who had found common ground in the most unexpected of places. All because one day she spoke, and he listened.